It's science.
Yo, we're back. This is the Starving Podcast. Your host, Justin P. Romer. And the co-host is
Science.
Jordan, live and in charge from
Jordan
Prague.
what Bishop? What's your middle name, bro?
I'm Michael.
Give these people what
so, I get that all the time. Are you Michael Jordan? Like, no, it's just backwards.
The exact
Just
opposite.
backwards. Yeah, the opposite, but even cooler.
I'll
say.
take it. We're here for the Game Changers Review Part 2. If you missed Part 1, please go back in your preferred podcast app and find Part 1. So in the Part 1, we actually went over a lot of stuff regarding the Game Changers movie. We went over what is a vegan diet versus a vegetarian diet. What are some of the agenda-driven things behind cereals and Kellogg brands versus the USDA. We also went over what some of the causal relationships are for performance athletes. So a danger that scientists and other people get into is if you do X, Y will result, and this is a very dangerous thing in science. And it highlights some of the agenda-driven motions in the Game Changers movie. We talked about the strontium levels, how, this is also causal, and it's also found in spices. It's not just in fruits and vegetables. And we also really dove in on the gut microbiome literature, as well as protein, how protein secretes myokines. It is the largest organ in the body, according to muscle scientists. And if you want to prevent sarcopenia, which is the loss of muscle, you need to have enough dietary protein, including the amino acids, the essential amino acids, leucine, isoleucine, and valine, which are in vegetables and fruits, but in low quantities. So other micronutrients, if you're thinking about a vegan or vegetarian diet that you need to supplement with, or think about supplementing with, are iron, zinc, B12, creatine, and vitamin D3. Most people already supplement with vitamin D3. So we really highlighted some of the drawbacks of the vegan diet, some of the potential advantages, but really we really delved in on what you need to do in regards to your supplementation and nutritional needs based on variance if you're going to follow a vegan or try a vegan-based diet. All right, so please check that out. It's a good segue into this podcast where we're going to talk about a lot of different stuff. So Jordan, in the podcast, they talk about cholesterol and LDL, and they have this scene with the test tubes where they have, they have essentially, yeah.
The platelet separation and all
Right.
that stuff.
So I believe the experiment was that they had a plate which consisted of meat, animal product versus not, and they actually they took a blood sample, correct?
Yeah. They took so they did a 2-part study where in one meal they gave the 3 athletes, they gave them, I believe it was chicken, pork, it doesn't matter, they gave them meat, and the second day they gave them just plant-based burritos. The guys were pretty happy when they were doing that, and the idea was that they ate the food, then I think an hour or two later on they took blood from them, nothing special, and then the next day they repeated it, and then they gave a nice graphic in the movie where they spun the blood out and you see the platelet separation, the separation gel, not gel, but it's separation fluid, and then the supposed fat content of their blood on top. So that would represent all the free-floating lipids that are contained in your blood. And the idea with that is that they had they showed an obvious distinction between their plant-based burrito and their animal-based burrito. That the plasma that was on the top of the test tube was all cloudy, and the doctor who was performing this test said, this is this is your blood on animals, and this is your blood on plants, and showed them which one looks more icky and and what's the purpose, behind that. Um, and yeah, I think the idea they were getting at was the cholesterol levels, and the they don't really talk about too much in that particular one, but the differences in the absorption. This idea that your body will dump out animal lipids, animal derived cholesterol more quickly into your blood than with plants, and some of the criticism to this online has been, you know, they don't show you exactly what is in the burrito. They don't give you a detailed list. And the idea why this would matter is because if you're eating a plant-based burrito with less component, cholesterol, less fat in it, well, clearly it's not going to show up in the blood. And then also, if you have rice or beans or anything, um, even the burrito wrapping is going to slow down that process of dumping the lipids into your blood. So that's the overall gist of the
Right.
experiment.
Yeah, that's this is one of those causal things again, but I would be interested to know because, look, if you if it's been since the 1920s, right, that we've been in this cycle of this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad, right, and if we're really now that we have years and years of heart disease data, cancer data, right, we can start to really find trends and patterns in the human disease space with different foods, okay? And we're in a position now where at least people that, you don't have to necessarily be an expert, but people that know about nutrition, right, and educate themselves know that saturated fat is not bad. Okay, it's not. Um, it's oxidized LDL, trans fats, and vegetable oils that are bad. And you see this when Crisco and these companies started to develop vegetable oils in the 1920s, and they said eat vegetable oils to cure your heart disease. And um, you know these vegetable oils since that day, heart disease has increased significantly. So, what does the American Heart Association do? They say don't eat vegetable oils, right? Because they contain trans fat and highly oxidizable rancid LDL. So, um, LDL on its own and saturated fat on its own aren't inherently bad. Um, it's the oxidized products of LDL. Okay, so I would be interested to know within the study if, which is very, very common, it's found. So basically, any product, if you go to any, get any processed food, if you go to a restaurant, they're cooking in vegetable oil, they're in soybean oil, it's everywhere, right? So it wouldn't be out of the question that the meal prepared with the meat, right? That showed the turbid plasma, right? Was cooked in soybean oil or some other vegetable oil. You know what I mean? And I would be interested to see that data. So if you still think that saturated fat is bad, like butter and these types of things, in moderation are bad, really do your research. If you don't trust us, go and do your research on this because it's very apparent within the scientific literature now. Like for example, Crisco, right? Shout out,
Oh my
yeah,
God, Crisco. Oh
shout
my
out to
God.
Nick Martin, my buddy that works at Crisco. But they're essentially what they do to make these vegetable oils is they squeeze out through an extraction process, right? The vegetable oil, right, from seeds and different things like that. Okay, and they take it through a 17-step process. Okay, I've talked to people that have been at factories where they do this, and they actually do chemical extractions using hexanes. Okay, hexanes are in gasoline. All right, I've been an organic chemist for years now. It's what I know, right? This is what I went to school for. And if you drink like 5 mils of hexanes, like you're messed up. like horribly messed up or dead. So they extract this, these trans fats and vegetable oils, right, using hexanes, and then they take it to a 17-step process, and then they give you something like Crisco that's highly oxidizable. That's why it's colored when you leave it in the sun or you leave it exposed to, even room temperature over time. It oxidizes, it becomes a little bit more rancid and a little bit more rancid. This is what happens, right? This is why you should throw out your fish oil if they're rancid, okay? And they become oxidized, right? What do we take antioxidants for? We take antioxidants, right? Like blueberries, strawberries, these colored foods have antioxidants. They prevent oxidation, okay? Because oxidation causes inflammation, which leads to growth diseases, anabolic diseases. What are the growth diseases? Cancer, heart disease. So the fats that are oxidizable, right? And LDL is oxidizable. So if you're taking in vegetable oil, right? This is what causes the arterial plaque buildup, causes heart disease, etc. Right? So Crisco, 17-step process using chemicals that will kill you for extraction, or butter, 2-step process. Milk the cow, curd. I mean, it's pretty obvious what you should be thinking about putting into your body. And just to talk about the relative risk. So the relative risks for different things are out there. So like your relative risk, okay, and for a relative risk to be significant, it has to be above a 2. All right. So your risk of smoking and getting cancer is a 12. Okay, 12. That's very, very high. It's very significant, right? The relative risk for meat is 1.2. So it's not even close to that of 2, which is a relative risk that obviously, we shouldn't be concerned about, right? So this is sort of some of the nuances regarding cholesterol, LDL, trans fats, and this is why this experiment to me, I can't really, I can't. And what about like clearance? It doesn't say anything about clearance. Like this is the blood after a certain period, but what did they eat the meal after? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
that's it. All has it. It's all. It should have been done with a little bit more attention to detail, and not for anything either. They're testing athletes. We know that athletes' bodies hopefully are functioning on, on 10. They're not given. Um, there's this idea in some of the in a lot of the scientific work when you're comparing diet that you should be focusing on the top 10 1% of individuals, which are usually represented by athletes. So you get this idealized vision of how people are clearing things into their bloodstream, their absorption levels, how quickly they can pull nutrients out of foods, and how long does it take something to pass through the entirety of their digestive tract. But realistically speaking, if me and my buddies are going to Moe's or going to Chipotle or something, and that these results they don't have too much bearing on that. And I think the other thing that just tie back to what Justin was saying earlier, that we know these fats are so terrible that they're actually starting to ban them now. So trans fats, I'm not sure if they're banned in the U.S., but I know worldwide they're starting to get like blacklisted. They're one of those nefarious things that our bodies will uptake so quickly and so readily, but they serve absolutely no nutritional value. It's like a drug. They're made to signal that release of endorphins in the brain that say like, oh yes, something high and fatty and tasty, but there's no concomitant nutritional value that you would get, say, from like a goose fat or even olive oil or butter or something that has you know a vitamin in it. These things are just made in a lab to basically kill you. But
yeah, no, it's a
yeah,
good point. And it really, this really brings, so that's sort of a general sort of approach, and for most people, almost all people, I would say you should avoid trans fat as much as possible. So you want to, you could have nuts and seeds. It's the extraction process out of that that's the vegetable oils and the problem, right? But extra virgin olive oil and things like this, these things are safe, and don't be afraid to use butter and things like that for your cooking. So, the other thing, going from general to more individualized. So, um, high cholesterol in people can also be a genetic variation. Um, there is a gene, right, called familial hypocholesterolemia, okay, and it's found on chromosome 19, and it basically makes the body unable to remove LDL. This is a gene, okay, and this is something that some people experience, right? And it can be tested, right? And it makes the LDL extremely high, obviously, because the body's unable to remove LDL based off of this gene mutation, okay? So to go on an individual basis, someone like that, right, if they don't have good LDL clearance, right, that means the LDL is sitting in their body longer, potentially become oxidized, and boom, that's where we have this formation of arterial plaque, and this is the problem. So, someone that knows that they have this, they should probably be taking in less LDL and quote unquote bad cholesterol, right? It is the worst cholesterol of the two, LDL, HDL, right? But this is one specific case where your genes and the individualistic approach do matter. And with the intrinsic diet, this is why we get in people's blood work, and we get these markers for blood glucose, LDL, HDL, overall cholesterol, T3, T4, thyroid hormones, ASTL, ALTL, like all of these things, right? Because then we can take, a synergistic approach that's individualized to people, And even as another example, I mean, another variation is in the gene pool is a mutation of FHBO, which is caused by mutation in ApoB, and ApoB is the carrier protein for LDL. So since this mutation, causes upregulation of ApoB, it actually lowers LDL tremendously. So there are people with inherently low LDL, like extremely low, because they're able to clear LDL, so readily in the body. Like that process, based off of this mutation, is just a lot easier for some people. Those people can and should have more LDL. You know what I mean? Saturated fats and things like that. They're able to clear these things better than others. So LDL is just not the whole story. Like obviously, if you go to the doctor and your LDL is high, you're not having good clearance of that, and you need to stay away from foods that present high LDL. But there are other markers too, like the ApoB protein I was just discussing. Like you can get this checked too. It's a more comprehensive fat panel, right? But you can get your ApoB checked, and LDL particle number can also be checked. All right, so LDL, when you get this data back in your blood work, this is the concentration of LDL in your blood. And this isn't the whole story, right? There's actually the number of individual LDL particles, which have actually shown to be a better representation of your risk of heart disease and formation of arterial plaque, So these are some of the unique and individual aspects of cholesterol, LDL, the bad fat, assuming you take in oxidized forms or highly oxidized forms, and you don't clear it well. So
Yeah, yeah. I'll put a link on the reading list for this sort of popular science article. Well, I think it's Everyday Health, but they were talking about some of the populations that have this. I can never say it right. The familial
yeah, that's right.
hypercholesterolemia, or
Yeah.
the FH. Yeah, but they say it's often underdiagnosed. It's something around 1 in 400 people have it, and the genetic lines usually run through people with descent from French Canadian or the Ashkenazi Jewish population. So if that's something you have in your family, it might be worth it to get checked out. But again, I'll put that link up on the reading list so you can stay well
Right.
informed.
No, yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, just for to reiterate, clarification, LDL is the bad cholesterol. Okay, if it's you take in oxidized forms of different fats and you have bad LDL clearance, um, and a lot of the arguments over the past 10 years have been saying that saturated fat is the culprit for high LDL, and we know that this is not the case, and that it's highly oxidizable um, trans fats and things from vegetable oils. So I want to get into the environmental issue for this, and this is not meaning to change anyone's ethics on this, or why they might become a vegan or a vegetarian versus a meat eater um, or a carnivore like Jordan here. Um, so, the environmental issue is a big reason why people are influenced. So we just want to provide some of the data on this. Um, so if you look at greenhouse gases, right, 50% of the world's greenhouse gases are just natural, like the plant. We're a green planet, people. You know what I mean? Like, go live on Mars if you don't want any greenhouse gases. You know what I mean? This is just the reality. And the EPA actually reported, I believe it was in 2018, that 50% of greenhouse gases come from the U.S.
Oh, at
Yeah.
least. Like, yeah, we're
Yeah.
so bad
Well,
with that stuff.
this is what
It's
the
unreal.
data says, 15%. So this is sort of nor here nor there. Greenhouse gas in general, in excess, we know are doing harmful things to our planet, right? This is just to minimalize how much is coming from meat. So 15% of greenhouse gas from the U.S. 9 of that is agriculture. Okay, 5 is fruit and vegetables. 3.6% is cattle, feedstock, dairy, and this includes carryover to feed. So like what it takes to feed livestock and things like that, right? And if you actually think about a cow, for example, like these are upcyclers of food, right? Like we use a lots of parts of the cow, right? We use the hide and we use other parts of the cow. We don't just like kill it, take its meat, and then just leave it, and bury it somewhere. Like we use a significant part of it. Um, if you have a very in touch spirituality or moral um, sort of compass towards animals in general, right? Then that's a whole different story. I can't contest anyone on that, and I love animals too. But meat is just a wonderful, wonderful thing for me.
Nice for you to close that
Yeah,
out
I
like
can I
that.
can speak to the environmental part, but obviously, like on the ethics of killing animals and things like that, the ethical side, I can't speak to that. This is obviously a personal preference for people, and if it makes you feel better and you feel like, um, this is something that you're in tune with, then you should continue to not eat meat to save the animals. Um, but I do also want to go into the ecology a little bit about this, um, which I'm going to defer to my good friend here, uh, Jordan, because I think he's um,
Just chomping at the
yeah,
bit
he's
for
been
this one.
waiting. He's
I've been waited 2 weeks, 2 3 weeks for this. So, like Justin said about his background, he's an organic chemist, which I run away from screaming whenever I hear anything about organic chemistry. But my background, my undergraduate degree was in environmental science, specifically within ecology and the natural sciences. My master's was in um, what was it in? Evolutionary
That's
biology.
not good, dude.
Uh, and I'm yeah, yeah, and yeah, and then I'm doing my PhD work in Antarctica. So and it's also in ecology. So I get lost in the weeds when I'm reading these sort of things. So I'm gonna just give you guys a ton of resources on the reading list because I don't want to start talking like a crazy conspiracy theorist on the podcast because that will often happen when I'm talking about these things.
Do it,
So I
do
started,
it.
yeah, do it, yeah, yeah. We're gonna make this thing really interesting to listen to. So like Justin said about the greenhouse gases, this this movie was made for a very particular audience, and that audience being the male meat eating, sort of knuckleheaded, average American male. And if it was made that way because, like Justin said, we have we're one country, but we take an overwhelming predominance in just about every category of every environmental abuse, greenhouse gas release, and never mind carbon. We don't even need to talk about carbon. We can talk about the nitrous oxides, which have 1,000 times the warming potential that carbon does, that are readily released in the air when we're farming. All those diesel engines that they say are much cleaner. No, they're not. They release less carbon usually, but they release 10 times as much nitrous oxide. That's We're getting off on a tangent here, but
Baby, don't
um,
worry. Go back to
don't worry,
high
just go with it.
school. Baby, don't worry.
So the the idea that so the resources that they had cited for the the water consumption, the changing over in diet in the film, I thought they did a really great job. They quoted one, and I have this giant circle around it. This Poor et al. It's a science article, which Science is a extraordinarily respected journal in the scientific community. Obviously, it's named Science, but it also has the reputation of publishing these very large studies that get people
They're
talking.
controversial, The
And
Science is one of the best journals,
yeah,
but
it's
they
like
publish some controversial stuff in there.
yeah. I mean the study they cited here. And I'm gonna put a link to it in the reading list. It's from 2018, and they said in the later part of the film that if we were to switch away from all agriculture, and meat packing and everything like that, we would save like 73% of like emissions or all these harmful things. I don't take any issue with that. I think it's a great thing, but it's completely unrealistic. What the interesting thing for me is, and the stuff that drives me up an absolute wall when it comes to this, is that in the very next paragraph, there's a mediation strategy that would call for, say, consuming half of the animal products that we do, and it has very similar results. You can't cherry pick stuff in a like in an article like this. This is the same crap that leads people to believe that not vaccinating your kids is is somehow good for them. Cherry picking in the same article, in the very same paragraph. So I understand it's a movie, they're going to do what they want. This stuff like this just drives
Yeah.
me up a wall. That being said, like we mentioned last time, this article in Science is a meta-analysis, and it's one of those meta-analyses that is a component. It's based on components of other life cycle analyses. I'm not a statistician. I'm not a mathematician, and those life cycle analyses get bogged down in the weeds really quickly. Um, the science is great in it, from what I was able to read. I think the entire article is about 80 pages. Um, I love you guys, but I'm not reading 80 pages on one article. It's a waste of time. But yeah, well, it is. It's for its one, the payoff and all that. But the what is it? I lost my train of thought on that one. I got all
I
hyped
know,
up.
dude.
Yeah. So the main point, the main point with that is they do present good arguments with it, but there's also this, uh, it's part of the strategies for mediating what's going wrong with the environment. You can propose things like this little factoid they ripped from the Poor et al. Article, where they say, okay, let's stop all meat gathering and all this craziness. Oh, that's just not going to happen. But the cool thing about these large-scale meta-analyses is that they'll often present mitigation arguments in them that actually can be implemented. Ugh. So for that, I do give them credit. Um, Another point they mentioned with air travel and how that equates with meat production. I've found any number of sources that give you similar numbers for that the meat production is equal to global air travel. We know now that air travel is it's just terrible for the environment, but nobody's going to stop doing that. So that's for me. It seems like a moot point. And let's see, what else do I have on my notes? Oh yeah, they also cited too that according to this poor et al. Article that um, if we stop production of meat, we would get back all these ecosystems that were getting destroyed because of meat production. That's a really that's a tough that's a tough sell for me. The two ones we learned in school that are huge now are both areas of Southeast Asia and Brazil. Brazil is famous for slashing and burning much of its rainforests, but it's due to both cattle and soybean production. Soybean production being for both cattle uses and people. All that tofu the vegetarians eat has to come from somewhere,
soybean oil,
or
man.
just yeah, yeah,
Vegetable
or
oil,
also
killing Americans,
mhm.
man.
Jesus Christ. And then the last one we have too are the very large palm oil plantations in Southeast Asia, which are also destroying arguably an even more rare version of rainforests. Some of the same idea of the rainforest occur in Brazil, but the Southeast Asian subcontinent there's different types of rainforests. They're much more rare, and they're being slashed and burned to make palm oil. And what's palm oil used for? I love Nutella, but there's a ton of
Killing
palm oil
people.
in there. Um, yeah, and it's terrible for you. It's an additive that at least here in the Czech Republic, they will tell you if it's in something like big bold letters, like hey, this has it in there, or it'll say without palm oil. It's like a big selling point. So those are just some other, the ecology side to it. But I'm definitely forgetting some stuff I wanted to say. But I'll just give you guys a bunch of articles to read, and you can knock yourselves out rather than listening to me ramble. So that's that.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's definitely all things to be considered regarding ecology and like we went over the environmental stuff. So. I hope as many people as possible can listen to this podcast before just watching the movie and then jumping into a vegan or vegetarian based approach. Necessarily, it won't be bad, especially if you weren't eating good before. But you're really limiting, the variance in your food by doing that significantly. And you have to see through the movie that they're selling they're marketing a vegan diet, and they have an agenda because the foods that they're showing are like beautiful. Like they didn't show just like cut up cucumber and like, hey, eat this. No, it was like this elaborate plate with like this processed vegan plate with like drizzle on it. Like, come on, like I get it. Like they got to do that for the movie, but the overall message from CBG is, if ethically you want to try a vegan and vegetarian based approach, you can do it. Feel free to get more information from us. Sign up with us. We know the micros that the vegan and vegetarian approach lacks, so we'll be able to help you on that front to make sure that you can take the right approach. But for our meat eaters out there, you need to be eating more fruits and vegetables. That's just a reality. There are great sources of electrolytes and dietary fiber and other things in fruits and vegetables that really help the gut microbiome. And you don't need to omit meat to do that. You know what I mean?
Eat mostly veggies. Just measure out your meat, and you're gonna be so much happier if you're just eating more veggies. That's all. And I think that's if you take nothing else away, just realize what you're putting into that meat temple that you have. You only get one. It sounds corny, but it's the truth. You eat some plants and veggies now, you can play with your grandkids when you're 85 years old. Like, ain't no deal.
Pancakes.
Just, yeah, who wants pancakes? But I think we should wrap it up instead of indoctrinating more people to our
Absolutely.
cause. We got we got plenty of time for
Yeah.
that.
All right. So you can find us on _starving_podcast on Instagram. You can also find us at consistencybreedsgrowth.com, or you can email us at consistencybreedsgrowth@gmail.com. You can find us at CBG_online sports on Instagram. So thanks everybody for listening. We're going to be back. Go back to high school.
Ooh, pancakes. You like them pancakes?
Peace.
Bye, guys.
Science.